Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've seen Queen and Slim, which is a romantic crime thriller movie. Drama. It's beautiful, I liked it.
I liked it very much as well. I would say it's an on-the-road film.
Okay.
That to me would be, the primary characteristics to me would be a kind of noirish road movie.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'd say romance is first and foremost for me. Crime falls into the background. It's about these two characters on the run after a first date that they don't really hit it off, and then they're black, that's important, and they're pulled over as he's driving her home by a cop who really is looking for a bit of a fight, and the situation escalates. He pulls a gun on him. He's played by Daniel Kaluuya, she's played by Jodie Turner-Smith, and we're not given their names for a long time. Not even Queen and Slim. In fact, they're not called Queen and Slim by anyone.
I don't think so.
It's just the title of the film and the credits. He attacks the cop, manages to get his gun off him, and shoots him dead. And from then on, they're on the run. Spoilers will be coming up after that, I think. So, I think there's, for me at least, I think there was supposed to be an element of comedy in there. I think there's an element of these two not getting on, and they're pushed together by this situation. They would realistically have not seen each other again after that night, and of course they can't now.
No, but that's a trope of romantic films, that the protagonists begin disliking each other, and then circumstances allow them to discover each other, and they realize that they found the person in their lives. So this operates a little bit like that. And that's an important part of the film.
It's kind of the darkest meet cute in cinema history.
It is. But I think for me the most important thing is that the film feels like a state of the nation statement. Yeah, it feels like a collective expression rather than just merely an individual one. And the fact that it's a road movie for me is central to that. Because everywhere you go, you discover instances of oppression, of, a racism so dreadful and so structural and so known and so consented to that basically black people don't have a chance. And part of the way that this film is structured is that you see both all of the different kinds of oppression, the jails and so on. It's kind of slave labor, really. Their knowledge of what it means to be arrested by a white cop, the various forms of collaboration within the system, but also the only spaces that they find throughout this oppressive America is hidden black spots. I
thought it had a Green Book element, and I don't really mean the film Green Book, but the actual Green Book, the thing about black-owned businesses and black-friendly spaces in America. The film conspicuously starts off with the diner that he takes her to. He says it's black-owned. Yeah. And then you see what is probably a black-owned bar, though you're not told, but it's a hub for the black community where they are.
It's all black people and they're playing the blues. And
then later they go to a mechanic to get their car fixed, and that's clearly the black guy who runs it, the mechanic. It's his own garage.
That's right. So it has a little bit of a feel of, like you said, a Green Book, but also one of those black railroad films, Underground Railroad films.
Yeah, I thought that too. As they jump sort of from safe house to safe house.
That's right. In which white people significantly help, and black people significantly also betray. Yeah. So I think it's at the beginning I thought, this is not very well filmed. I thought it was too dark. I thought the focus wasn't clear. It kind of grew on me, really. I grew to appreciate it more and more because there's a real consistency of light, or rather darkness. It all takes place at night or at dawn or at dusk. Yeah, it has, that feel of the night. There are very few scenes that take place in sunlight. The main one is when they're trapped in the house.
I thought there was more sun like that. I mean, you see them on the road during the day once or twice when he rides the horse.
That's true.
But there is a predominant feeling of nighttime or dusk. Yeah, as you say, I think that's true. What do you think of the fact that we don't find out these two's names until they die?
Well, there's a whole thing about how are you remembered, how are you survive, what's the place of children, and I think it kind of all has to do with kind of black culture in some way. Yeah, I kind of.
I thought it's a really half baked thought, but I thought there's something of like they're only given that identity once they're dead, and before that they're ideas or something like that.
I don't know. There's a very famous essay by James Baldwin called "Nobody Knows My Name," and it is about this thing really already from another time, because I think part of an earlier literature is that if America really knew the extent of racism and oppression, and that things would change, whereas actually now you feel everybody knows and nothing changes. So actually there are kind of different levels of colluding into the system. I mean, my own feeling about it all is if you're voting for Trump and you disapprove of this racism, you're colluding. Yes, either you're agreeing with it or you're colluding, really. But anyway, there's this whole thing about naming and renaming and not accepting your slave name, and there are all of these things that are very, particular.
I think it's something that kind of makes the end even more tragic, because I think it's already tragic that they die, although I think it's kind of fated. I mean,
there's no escape.
Certainly from the moment that someone refers to them as Bonnie and Clyde, I thought, oh, there's foreshadowing. These guys aren't going to make it to the credits, So no. I kind of made my peace with that early on.
Yes.
But I think there's a thing of like, up until then, they are romantic, and they're not exactly ideals. Like people kind of make of them what they want, and some spaces that they go to, black people salute them almost. Kind of think that they've made a political statement. Other places, as you say, the mechanic really don't approve. They find a problem with it. They say, "Well, you've given them license to shoot us more now," that kind of thing. So it's not about them kind of taking on one kind of ideal persona or image, but after they die, they just become statistics. Angela, whatever his name was, Eamon or something, they died.
I think they become more than statistics. They become folk heroes as well. People wear their faces on their T-shirt.
Their image remains, but there's something diminishing, I think, about the fact that they're just these guys with names.
Well, no, I don't agree in relation to that interpretation, because so much is made of how we'll be remembered. What is the meaning of life? Is it just the whole meaning of life is that you hope somebody remembers you, and actually they are remembered, right? So.
Yes.
So I think there's some kind of catharsis in that of just, having existed in a way that is remembered. It makes kind of their oppression worthwhile. Oppression is not the right word that I'm looking for, actually. Their persecution worthwhile.
Mm. Were you moved?
Yes, actually, I was surprised because... I don't think it's a perfect film.
No.
Yeah, she's incredibly beautiful, but she's not as alive as he is. He's very charismatic and alive.
Do you mean as a performer?
As a performer,
right.
Yes. I mean, I think she works. She's very well cast. Yeah, and she works very well. And actually, her being so tall and so beautiful, and him in a way being, shorter than her and kind of ordinary looking. I mean, he's very charismatic, but, he's not like a beautiful man.
Mm.
Yeah, though he does look quite beautiful in some angles. But, I think he is meant to be like an average guy, and she is exceptionally beautiful and also like a lawyer and so on, right? So I think they work very well together, but she lacks his ease. You get a sense of a person with him, whereas you don't quite with her, I don't think.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think I liked her more than that.
Okay.
She felt very. She felt very real to me. I believed sort of everything about her.
Right.
That way. Although I can see what you mean. I mean, he is exceptionally kind of charismatic, Daniel Kaluuya.
Yes,
he has such a presence.
Yes, he does.
On screen.
Anyway, they work very well together. But there were a couple of things that I found unconvincing. So, for example, she looks spectacular wearing this meanie, this tiger skin meanie, like cut right to the waist practically. And you think, like, It doesn't make any sense. She's been shot in the leg. She's got a huge bandage in the leg. I mean, it's like, do you want to advertise that you're the person who's on the run? Right? Like,
she just threw that on when they had to leave quickly.
No, she went through the clothes. She chose that dress. It didn't make any sense to me that would be the dress.
I'm right.
I'd wear something that would cover it up.
I think she just had to find something. Do you imagine there's anything that house was run by a pimp. Do you think any of those clothes cover your legs?
Wearing your wound, when you're being chased and you're in cameras.
I'm saying
everywhere.
she didn't have an option.
Well, that's not made clear in the film. You're just assuming that.
Well, I'm buying into the film, so sue me. I think the costume changes are interesting, though, because, particularly her, she starts off with this turtleneck that I think really speaks to her kind of tight, close, like almost uptight nature. She doesn't really want anyone to get in. And I think the kind of turtlenecks, they have this thing of, like, constantly feeling like you're being throttled by someone very weak.
I love them.
But you know what I mean? Like this.
I feel like Jean-Paul Sartre in that turtleneck.
She's very closed in that, and then, because it's right up around her neck, you really feel there's something oppressive about that, and closed in, and then she ends up wearing the most skimpy thing she possibly could. It was kind of interesting. His costume change is into he's wearing something very ordinary at the start. I can hardly remember. It's just sort of like jeans and a jacket type thing, and then he winds up in this sort of red velvet tracksuit. You kind of think, like, the image, certainly of him, you imagine that playing out on like Fox News as such a thug, kind of really feed into sort of what they believe. I didn't know what to think about that, if it was kind of using that idea or reconfiguring it or saying something else with it. I don't know. I thought the film really touched on every major issue of black oppression. This is why I think it feels like a collective work of expression rather than, the story about two people. Yeah. And also the collaborations, to have Gayle King, is it? Oprah's producer. CBS News, right?
And Chloe Sevigny, and, it does feel like people almost like, contributing to a moment of U.S. National expression. And then, it covers kind of all of the issues to do with the police, with the Me Too, no, not Me Too.
I Can't Breathe. There was Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter movement, which is kind of represented. There's a whole range of black music, almost to like give, full expression to different black cultures. Like, there's rap and funk and soul and blues, and I found all of that entrancing. And the characters are on the run, and they're nowhere safe, really, So I also thought that was telling. But at least they weren't slaves, like, the men in the work gang, being policed by cops on horseback who are clearly, like, in jail and just like a slave labor, right? The film is full of all of these little suggestions that speak a culture. The references to the Black Panthers,
and Assata Shakur.
Yeah, so I thought that was all incredible, and it is encased in like this road movie outlaw romance. The only thing, in a weird way, is I wish they would have shot more white people. Like, it would have offered a moment of catharsis, Whereas in fact, they go so out of their way to like make the couple non-violent, actually. Because there's that scene where, he goes to the gas station thinking he'll hold it up because they need gas money. And instead he gives his gun to this white kid. That creates this moment of tension. I think it would have provided kind of a moment of release for the audience, really.
That was quite early on, to be fair. I wouldn't have believed he had it in him at that point, because he's not violent, and it is an accident and so on.
That's true,
the thing I really didn't believe about that scene, though, was that he would hand the gun over. I thought, even though he is not too bright, I didn't believe he would be
so stupid.
No.
Yeah, and actually, that feels phony in the film.
Yes, because it has that. It's a cinematic trope of, I'm just fucking with you. He points a gun at him. I'm just playing. Nah, I knew that was coming. I didn't believe that scene.
Yeah. I thought the scene with the sheriff who helped them was quite good. I thought the Chloe Sevigny thing was quite good.
Yes, the jumpy wife who they go to her husband for help, having been told he's played by Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
But she is pretty much ready to hand them in.
And actually, you suspect she made the phone call to the guy with the plane.
Oh, I didn't suspect that because she didn't know. I didn't. Well, she didn't know exactly. She didn't know
how did the guy who picks them up and takes them to the seaplane? How did he know that that they would be there and so on? Wasn't he the person they were meant to get in touch with?
Yes, but he's the one who then sorted out. We're going to meet the guy at the plane, and obviously at some point he's arranged. Maybe even the phone call was to the cops, and it was a fake phone call. I believe it was him rather than her.
Okay.
And I think
that kind of makes sense.
And I think the reason that the cops showed up at her house, Chloe Sevigny's house, was because you see right when they pull up, there's someone across the road watching.
I saw that. That was telegraphed quite directly.
Yes.
What faults do you find with it?
It felt a little slow to me at points. I think my attention started to wander once or twice, but actually, I think it was a price worth paying for the tone and the mood that was set. I liked the length of it, and I did like the slowness of it, and I think it gave you real time to breathe with these characters, and I think it helps you believe in the length of time that the film feels like it's taking, helps you to believe the gradual romance that they fall into. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't feel quite so sudden as it otherwise might. And so by the time that they kiss and have sex in the car, I believed they got to this point emotionally. Do you know what I mean? And I think that the slowness helps that.
Do you think it's a noir?
Yeah, I do. These guys are fated to die. There's no escape.
I remember my colleague Victor had this thing about, so there are femme fatales, and then there are unwitting femme fatales, women who end up causing men's death even though they don't necessarily mean to. And I thought this was one of those instances, because the film goes out of its way to register, I hesitate to use the word uppity because it has such connotations, but there is a sense in which kind of part of the reason why the cop is reacting the way that he is, she's a hotshot lawyer and she's behaving like a hotshot lawyer, and she's forgetting that she's also a black woman. Something that Slim is constantly reminding her of. We're black, it's a cop, there's all these dangers. And you do have these really interesting moments of tension. Yeah.
And later on, of course, the mechanic says, I wouldn't have shot the fucking guy, I wouldn't have caught a fight, I would have just accepted my ticket and shut the fuck up and gone home.
Yeah. And you do feel that it's her causing all of that. Yeah,
she's the one who slightly wants to make a bit more of it than
it
is. But the cop is the aggressor.
It's true, and he kills her. But that whole dynamic in the car at the beginning is very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really brilliantly put together scene.
Yeah, and she is the cause of all of it. I mean, she's the one who takes his phone, which makes him cause the swerve, and she's the one who answers back, who insists on their rights, kind of, it's very interestingly done. Although then, of course, it turns into a real love story as well. But there are those kind of elements of it which are very interesting, I think.
And I thought it was such a romantic ending, really.
It's a very romantic ending.
Yeah, in the most heartbreaking way.
It's a very beautiful ending. It couldn't have ended almost any other way, really. But the way that it's done, with her being shot first and him picking her up and then kind of, them falling together, I thought it was very romantic.
What a response from him. That's what I didn't sort of see. I knew they had to die, but the way it happens and what he does with her body, I couldn't have come up with that.
No.
Because there's no reason for him to do that, right? There's no logical reason for him to do that.
Well, defiance. And also, that they're in it together, know.
But it's just...
Because there is also that element from Double Indemnity, to the end of the line, which they kind of have that little speech at the beginning.
Yeah. But it's just it's a shock, emotional reaction. She's the only thing he has left. I don't know. And he's so wonderful. He always looks like he's crying, Daniel Kaluuya. He's got this redness in his eyes all the time.
Yes, he does.
When she said at the start she picked him on Tinder because he looked sad, he thought, I know what you mean. Poor guy, but I know what you mean.
All through the beginning, I thought they're not being well lit, right? There's all those things about, black skin needing more light, and they weren't being offered it, really.
Well, it's a tricky thing, isn't it? I think we've read a couple of articles by people who have been making films and TV programs that star black people in dark places like clubs or at night and that kind of thing, and they talk about needing, if not more light, because you can't necessarily get it really in those situations, but ways to make their skin more reflective. And I can see elements of that here. You do get that. There was one scene where she's getting her hair cut, and I always that thing of moonlight. Black people look blue in the moonlight was I think the original title of the play that was based on, and you see it in that scene, her face, and it kind of, her face does light up so beautifully there. So sometimes it's really beautiful and expressive, and you see things clearly. Other times not so much, but I didn't necessarily think that was a problem. I didn't have quite have a problem with it. I know what you mean about it occasionally looking like it's out of focus or slightly blurry, but I think everything there is a choice, and I think it's trying to evoke a tone and almost an era. I mean, it's set in the modern day, but there are times when it feels like it's the 70s.
Yes. One of the reasons is they let go of their mobile phones, so
and they drive a classic Cadillac.
Yes. But also, I don't know, there's something about the landscape as well, the graffiti, the rundown towns, it really speaks of an America, again, I think I've said this before, where everything natural is beautiful and everything that man's put into nature looks run down, rusty, deserted, that's the kind of America that they go through. And it's quite a lot because it begins in, is it Ohio or?
I think... Did they mention Ohio? I'm sure they mentioned Ohio. And they wind up in Kentucky early on, and then they go down to Louisiana and New Orleans.
Louisiana, and then they end up in Florida. So they go through all of the South, right? Which is, again, significant, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's interesting that Cuba is posited as a place of protection. Of course, in spite of the embargo and, all of those problems. And of course, they never reach Cuba. But, kind of reaching Cuba in this film is like reaching Canada in an underground railroad film,
Yeah. Yeah, well, and they do mention, as I say, Asada Shakur, who, that's where she fled, and she was she was convicted of killing a cop. I think she was a Black Panther.
Right.
And she fled there, although I think she maintained her innocence and so on. I remember hearing about this a few years ago because the rapper Common was invited to the White House under Obama, and then Fox News went, but he loves Asada Shakur, a cop killer, and then they started a whole fucking thing about it. Anyway, I remember that. So that's kind of where I learned about her a little bit. So I think that's a strong association. I mean, that's a name that Black Americans will be very familiar with, I think.
So it's directed by Melina Matsoukas, whom I've never heard of before and whom I believe this is the first film. This
is her first feature. She's done lots of ads and music videos. And a few episodes of TV.
Yeah, so it's a very, very impressive first film, I think. Do you have any idea how much it cost?
Yes, I do. According to the Wikipedia, which gets its figure from Deadline Hollywood, $17 to $20 million it cost.
Yeah, and it's already made 45.
Yes.
So it's a hit. And I'm glad it deserves to be a hit. Yeah.
I wonder if we could think a little bit about religion and faith in the film, because this is something that I think it's really front and centre in the Slim character. He believes in God and he talks about it quite a bit, and he talks about destiny and faith, and then also he wears a cross around his neck, and then in the Cadillac that they get from Uncle Earl.
Yeah, there's a rosary.
Yeah, there's a rosary and a cross hanging from the rearview mirror, and it is there all the time, and you can't miss.
Yeah.
It's framed front and centre quite a bit.
Yes, and he's meant to be. Are we told what he does for a living? I mean, he's got Nike.
No, he works at Costco. He says at the start that the woman comes to my queue. He says all the time,
okay, yes.
And I give her my discount.
Right, but it's also articulated that he doesn't drink.
Mm-hmm.
So he's an upstanding kind of Christian. And really then, she who appears to be upper class, let's say, she's a lawyer, turns out her uncle's running a brothel and with that beautiful transgender person from Pose. I forget what her name is. The one who did the hair.
Yeah. Do you want to find out? No.
Yeah, find out, because actually, I think she was on the cover of Vogue and everything. She's incredibly beautiful.
India Moore?
Yes, I think so.
She plays Goddess in this.
Oh, well, there you go.
And I don't have I don't really have a good read in this, but I think it's something that I need to basically think about taking more seriously, because it reminded me of Harriet, which is
right.
another black story, right? And that's a story in which faith again is incredibly important.
I hated that film.
I know we both didn't like it, but but the point is that faith is really important to that story, and there's a whole thing about Harriet Tubman believing that her visions were visions from God, and that's what.
Well, the problem wasn't Harriet Tubman believing, it's the film acting as if they were real, right?
But I think that's kind of like the thing is you almost never see devoutly religious film that actually supposes God really exists and religion is real. Outside of horror, really, like horror, you'll get like the devil is after you.
Yes.
But apart from that, you don't really get it. What you get is films about religious people or about religion, and it's about their beliefs. But the films never actually say, okay, we're going to suppose a priori that God exists and how
because then that would be like a stupid narrative. Like you could change direction every time you wanted to and just say it was God's will.
Well, you might.
That was the Harriet Tubman way of doing it. Sorry.
Maybe not. But I think it is something to be taken seriously, because I don't think it's a coincidence that these two films are about black people, black Americans, and that faith is kind of important to them. Because I'm sure I could be corrected here, but it's not something that I associate so much with films about white people or Asian or Chinese or anything like that. Like it seems to be something that is located specifically in black American experience. The
place of the church,
importance of the church belief in God.
Yeah.
I think it seems to be of particular importance and significance and resonance in black America and black American cinema, and it's something that I don't have a good read on, really.
Well, I think the church has been a prime site of community and resistance and struggle. So it's understandable that you often see churches. I mean, if you remember in Widows as well, like so much of it took place in the church, and but the pastor or the preacher was corrupt and highly involved in politics, and there was like this connection between the church and show business, but also community, and politics, right? It's not as evident in this film.
I think the kind of social side is not as evident, but Danny Kaluuya's character's relationship to his religion is important to him, clearly. And they definitely played off each other, because she says at one point she doesn't believe in God. But that's all you hear about it from her. But he continues to speak about praying or his belief that things are predestined. That I don't know. This is why I say I don't have a very good read in it. But there's definitely something. It's definitely important to the film.
Okay, I didn't feel it as strongly as you did. I mean, I think it's referenced, but it's not made an issue of. It's not, repeated or given a centrality. And even the moment where they say grace before dinner, it's.
I think that becomes important, because she says, "Can I lead it?" And that's a moment, I think, between the two.
Yeah, but her moment is to say, like, "Thank you for now," right? So it becomes almost like a kind of a Buddhist prayer in the middle, of what should be a Christian thing. I mean, it's just, I didn't read a religious significance into it. I read an expression of her feelings for him and for their experience so far, and how they might be about to die, but it hasn't been in vain, that the journey has been worth it, right? But I didn't read a...
Well, I think, yes, I don't think it's religious significance. Like I said, these films don't tend to say, okay, God is actually real, and now let's go. When religion and faith are invoked, they're done so to inform the characters. What are the characters' beliefs, and what are the characters' relationships? And so, the reason that I think that's important is not because she has sort of found religion or that there might be something real to it, but it's that from starting off with, the film opens on him getting his food at the diner and praying, and she's looking around going, "What the fuck is this guy doing?" That's the opening of the film. And then,
that hadn't registered.
I just remembered it. But then you get to the dinner scene later on, and she asks to start the prayer, not just participate.
It's true.
So it's about their relationship.
But let's not make... I mean, so I don't want to contradict or deny that religion might have a significance, right? But also, I think it is, there's no reference to it in like 99% of the film.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can agree to disagree on that.
Well,
I do think it's central. As I said, I think it's central. I think he brings it up quite a bit. There are these motifs, and the framing of the cross around his neck and the cross in the car are central to the images that they appear in.
Well, I didn't experience it that way, so...
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. And it has a very important scene about black people's hair, which is something that we've seen before, which is something that I don't think I'll ever really have a good handle on.
Right.
Remember we had a similar scene in If Beale Street Could Talk,
Yes.
where she puts that wig on,
Yes.
or decides, am I going to wear it or not? And in here you have the thing about shaving his head, and then her saying no way, and of course she does in the end. And it's a scene that I think they're intercut, and you see the girl undoing her braids, and it's something delicate and tender about it. It matters,
There's a whole discussion on hair, in fact, when they discuss, what's that singer's name? Very smooth, very popular in the 80s, and they say he's the only one that could rock a jerry curl and a three-piece suit, and something.
Oh, right, I don't remember.
I'll kill myself for not remembering his name.
Morris Day?
No,
Prince?
It's on the tip of my tongue. Not Al. He was the big fat man. He also kind of, was a backup singer, and Luther Vandross.
Luther Vandross, of course, yeah. Thin or fat Luther Vandross, they say.
Yes. I suppose the only thing that I want to underline is that the film is giving voice to so many of the struggles that we've seen in the news in the last 10 years. Particularly like Black Lives Matter, particularly all the information about the percentage of black men in jail, the police brutality, the jails being used as sites of slave labor for black people predominantly.
Yeah, 13th, which I referenced in the last podcast on Netflix,
that's
it's
right.
all about that, and it's brilliant.
Exactly. So, the film focuses on this relationship and on being on the run and on being on the road, but actually it's threaded through with this expression of all of those struggles. And I think it's an important film. I think as well as kind of, being an entertainment and moving one. I found it moving.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a really confident film as well. I think the slowness that I referred to, it takes confidence to do that and to believe that you're not going to lose people's interest and that kind of thing.
Yes. And I certainly responded viscerally to quite a few moments, actually. So
you definitely did.
Yes.
There are times when it built a bit of tension, and when she dislocates her shoulder,
yes.
and he puts back in under threat of being heard by the cops.
Yes.
You were hand over your mouth at that point.
Yes. And also, the moment where they jump out the window and, all of the beginning. I mean, I think it kind of is very good.
It's funny, of all the moments in cinema that make... that you think would make me go, oh, or like you very often respond to gore and things with a bit of a, ugh. The only thing that's really made me respond like that in recent memory is them jumping out the window.
Yes.
They don't even get hurt. Well, she just gets the shoulder. But they don't get seriously hurt. Like you think they're going to break a leg or something. But I just thought, God, that's because I can imagine jumping from that high.
Yes,
exactly. I can't imagine getting shot in the face.
Or you can't imagine being in the Avengers either.
Yeah, exactly.
But this, it definitely elicited a response.
So I think it's a very, very good film.
Yes. So do I, and I highly recommend it. I can't think of another film like this, actually. I can't think of a black romance, that's also a road film, that has all of these noirish elements, but then ends up also being a biting critique of American racism. And for a film to do all of that is really quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Its subtext informs everything, and it's so strong and makes everything so fully realised and three-dimensional. The entire place that the entire world that they're inhabiting, you understand everything about what these people are going through.
Yes.
And it's so much of it is done subtextually.
It's very inclusive. Yeah, because, she's a lawyer, he works at Costco, the uncle runs a brothel in Mississippi, he's a former army person, who's got contacts all over the place. when they go into that blues place, you see, it's real down and outers, but also having a community that is inclusive. I think, one of the people that you see is either a transgender person or a very feminine kind of gay male, so I do think it's inclusive, sexually inclusive, and also socially inclusive, whilst nonetheless, having a clear sense of the structural differences and inequalities between white and black people in America. So, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube to listen to us. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies. The website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.